Well, hi, good evening. Good evening and welcome. My name is Alex Marr, and I'm the Associate Curator for Native American Art here at the St. Louis Art Museum. It's such a pleasure to welcome you to the Farrell Auditorium this evening. It's been a long day this evening as we celebrate the opening of the remarkable exhibition Grounded in Clay. I hope that everyone has had the opportunity to view the exhibition already. If not, I welcome you to visit the galleries at the conclusion of this program. I believe our galleries are open until 9 tonight, so there should be plenty of time to catch the show if you haven't yet. It's really a remarkable exhibition and an honor to be hosting it here at the St. Louis Art Museum. So I want to begin by acknowledging that we're gathering on Native land. St. Louis is the ancestral territory for a lineage of indigenous peoples. Early in the last millennium, members of the Mississippian civilization built Cahokia and associated mounds in St. Louis. Later, in the 18th century, European arrivals in this place disrupted subsequent indigenous relations to the land. So members of the Illini Confederacy and Osage Nation know the St. Louis region as part of their homelands. Finally, of course, today, a diversity of Native peoples live in St. Louis, our friends, neighbors, and colleagues. So tonight we have the privilege to hear from Nora Naranjo Morse. Nora's work, Pods, recently went on view on the 3rd floor of the museum. I want to thank Helen Kornblum for her support in making this acquisition possible. Thank you very much, Helen. We really appreciate your support of the museum. And Nora also contributed to the curatorial collective for the exhibition Grounded in Clay. So I could think of no better person to speak this evening, to connect the exhibition, to draw out some of the major stories in the exhibition here for audiences in St. Louis. In order to properly introduce Nora to our audience tonight, I want to invite Alicia Poon to the stage. Alicia directs the Indian Arts Research Center at the School for Advanced Research in Santa Fe, one of the two institutions that organized this touring exhibition. She's the project facilitator for this exhibition and has played many key roles in developing and touring the show. So please join me in welcoming first Alicia to the SLAM stage.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you all for being here today. It's truly my absolute privilege to get to have the opportunity to introduce one of the hearts of this exhibit, one of my favorite people, someone who's taught me so much in the field of pottery, in the field of being in Pueblo communities, and just being an overall amazing teacher and friend. Nora Naranjo Morse was born and raised in northern New Mexico. She's a contemporary artist who energizes Pueblo ancestral sensibility into her art, using earth-based materials to create large public installations. One of Nora's public art installation pieces is at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., and if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it. Nora also works in a number of media. She's a hands-on learner and educator. Her public art pieces at the National Museum of the American Indian, as Alex said, it's been a long day, Always Becoming, in many ways exemplifies Nora's leadership. Always Becoming is interactive, collaborative, and needs yearly collective tending much like the project of Grounded in Clay does. Nora widens the circle of collaboration by sharing her art process and cultural information with others in her community and beyond. Nora lives in Kapowawenge tribal lands in an adobe house that she helped build. And she's just magical. I'm going to tell you that right now. This is what you need to expect. No pressure, Nora. Will you join me in welcoming Nora Naranjo Morse?
God, I'd better be good after that. Yeah, right, no pressure. Thank you for coming. I'm honored to be here. I'm probably gonna make a mistake with this little machine. Okay, here we go. I'm honored to be on the land of the ancestors, and to our relatives of this land, we, the Pueblo Collective, in collaboration with the Indian Arts Research Center and the Velchik Foundation, are proud to bring Grounded in Clay to the St. Louis Art Museum. There were 70 clay workers, poets, and Pueblo leaders were invited to select clay work from the Indian Arts Research Center and the Velchik collection. The curators were asked to write about the vessels and help in creating the exhibit at each venue that's across the United States, from New York to Texas, and here to St. Louis. Grounded in Clay offers the opportunity to share the history of Pueblo pottery. As Alicia said at lunch, a lot of the planning, and oh my God, there was a lot of planning, especially in the beginning. It happened during COVID. The curators, and you see them on the screen, and it's only a little bit of them, came together on Zoom meetings that became a familiar community gathering. I remember looking into the computer screen and seeing the curators in their studios, kitchens, and offices planning Grounded in Clay with our fearless and brilliant leader, Alicia Poon, who's the director of the Indian Art Research Center. I was usually in my pajamas watching people in their studios. I got the chance to see Kathleen Wall from Haymes, who's a sculptor in clay, coiling her magical figurines while she was part of the Zoom meetings. And I just couldn't take my eyes off her. I knew that something magical was happening Grounded in Clay when I saw the commitment and the real interest in what we were doing. The 70 Pueblo people who made up the Pueblo Collective come from communities whose ancestors have passed down knowledge of clay work. It's in our culture to know the clay and her importance in Pueblo principles. I gotta tell you this. I've been looking at archival footage for years. This has to be one of my favorite images because I look at this and I see myself. I am this little girl. I come out of the adobe wall and I'm holding that vessel, and I am part of what this earth is about. Grounded in Clay encouraged and supported a new generation of Pueblo clay workers to speak firsthand about the history we've been born into. Each person in the collective understands the labor involved in processing earthen materials, gathering clay along the hillsides and mountain areas of Pueblo land, sifting impurities from the clay, mixing clay with feet and hands, getting to know the feel of clay between your fingers and toes. As children, our family and communities modeled a relationship to the clay that connected us to one of the most basic principles of Pueblo culture, the care, use, and respect of the land we walk on. Embarking on a lifelong relationship with the earth has inspired generations of clay workers to create, innovate using traditional Pueblo clay practices. And it's in that earth-human relationship that carries the story of our people. Throughout Pueblo history, we have documented our culture through clay work and through the songs and ceremonies we've learned as children. There were also other documentarians and different perspectives. Photographers like Edward Curtis visited Santa Clara Pueblo in 1905 and spent time photographing Pueblo life. The time he spent documenting potters and their process has been a valuable resource to me. One of my most favorite things to do is visit the New Mexico Photo Archives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. To look on a screen at an image is one thing, but for me, to hold a photograph in my hand connects me to the important aspect of Pueblo culture. When I hold the image in my hand, I enter the scene. I am there in the early morning firing pottery. I can smell the cedar. I feel the anticipation. I'm standing with this Kapo woman, this Pueblo woman who could have easily been my biological relative. I am standing beside her in her knowing of clay. Our clothes may be different, but the basic process of working with this material stays the same. After all of this time, it's a kind of sustainability that anchors me. The history of Pueblo clay and the telling of it has always been a collective effort. Tonight, I want to share the Pueblo clay knowing through the voices of my fellow curators, relatives, and friends. And truthfully, I'm a fangirl of these curators. I admire their creativity and marvel at their breadth of knowledge. One of the curators is named Russell Sanchez. He's from San Ildefonso Pueblo. And if you're not familiar with the pueblos in New Mexico, San Ildefonso Pueblo is about 40 minutes outside of Santa Fe, going west, northwest. Russell is an exceptional potter, so if you get a chance, go online and look at his work. He chose his grandmother's pot from the collection. And let me just tell you that in Tewa, which is the language spoken in 6 of the 8 villages in northern New Mexico, Sa-ya means grandmother. He chose Ignacio Sanchez, his grandmother's vessel. And this is what Russell said. There was a time in history not so long ago when we were literally and metaphorically a community of potters. We did everything. Women sat together, worked together, and shared ideas. Children were present and learned not by instruction but by observation. Satya Nasya. Line work is unique. She was the only San Ildefonso potter to use horizontal, vertical, and parallel lines as design iconography. To be recognized as a good potter requires absorbing the elders' design, injecting them, and with our breath, creating renewed life. When I look at this jar, I see our community of potters. Women, men, families, young and old, are all working together for the common good and well-being of the Pueblo. About an hour west of Albuquerque, the original village of Acoma is perfectly hidden atop a 375-foot mesa. They call it the Rock. These people are tenacious and brave. Acoma people, like other pueblos in New Mexico, were subject to brutal colonization by Spanish conquistadors in search of land, gold, and souls. They thought all of it was theirs. By 1680, Acoma people had had enough of the colonization. They joined with other pueblos to successfully revolt against the Spaniards, driving them out of Pueblo territory for 11 years. See, you can see the 375-foot mesa behind these women working. Brian Vio is one of the curators who's from Acoma Pueblo. Brian has been working in museum development for over 30 years. He's also served as governor of Acoma several times. Governor Vio is well known in our communities and is a highly respected Pueblo leader. Brian chose this vessel. It was made in 1920, 1930s, and this is what he wrote. The construction of the water jar and the execution of design is exquisite. This is a fine example of traditional Acoma pottery making. The form is quite feminine, and rightly so, because a jar was possibly made for the potter or for another woman of a household who had the responsibility and had been skilled in collecting rainwater from one of the naturally formed cisterns. Brian continues, my grandmother always said, a good water jar should be somewhat bulbous at its center, with a neck that reduces splashing and controls the movement of water, a scarce resource. The 1680 Pueblo revolts were dark times for all Pueblo people. The revolt changed Pueblo culture in ways we are still grappling with today. The entire Pueblo population pre-contact was estimated around 313,000 people. By the late 1500s, when conquistador Don Juan de Oñate traveled into what is now New Mexico, the population of Pueblo people dropped considerably. After the 1680 revolt, the population was around 17,000. By 1750, there were fewer than 10,000 of us left. Genocide. Tragic times for all Pueblo people. Like the Tigua Indians who left their original homeland of Carari because of drought, they relocated to what is now Isleta Pueblo, south of Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Tigua Indians were captured by the Spaniards and forced to walk 400 miles south toward the Mexican border. 400 miles of harsh, barren land, so harsh that the conquistadors named a 90-mile stretch of those 400 miles, Jornada del Muerto, something translated to the route of the dead. In 1682, the Tigua finally settled and established the pueblo of Isleta del Sur near El Paso, Texas. We are survivors. Isleta del Sur is now a federally recognized tribe with a proud community of more than 5,000 people. This vessel comes from that history. And you can tell, look at it, the bowl is sturdy, no nonsense kind of form. It's utilitarian with the simple lines that's meant to hold so much of our lives and the things that are important to us. Okay, Albert, I'm going to talk about you, and I only hope I can do you justice. Albert Alvarez is another curator who was invited to select this vessel. He's from Isleta del Sur. He served 9 times as governor. 9 times. He is the leader of the highest order, a rare thing these days. And I want his granddaughter to know that she has the most strong and able and capable grandpa that I'm honored to know. Again, I'm a fangirl. Albert's also a potter who selected the bowl of Juana Ortega Munoz, who is also from Isleta del Sur. Albert wrote, "Pottery is an unspoken voice that tells of the maker, of tenacity, of ceremony, and the prayers of the family to which we belong." Cliff Wagwa from Jemez Pueblo is a sculptor. And if you've ever get to Washington, D.C., the rotunda at the Capitol, Cliff Wagwa has a sculpture there. So if you're ever there, please go and see it. He selected the work of Joseph Lone Wolf from Hop or Owinge, Santa Clara Pueblo. Cliff wrote, "For decades, the criteria for what constituted traditional Pueblo pottery was controlled by academics, art dealers, and critics. Because many potters relied on the pottery market, they had little opportunity for expression or expansion of design and form. It seems as if any challenge to the status quo disrupted what was supposed to be southwestern Pueblo pottery. I chose this pot because it represents a transition from traditional Pueblo pottery to more contemporary design. This was the late 60s, and Joseph Lone Wolf's work was influential in that shift. Joseph Lone Wolf is known for his use of historical clay methods and his development in sgraffito and bas-relief techniques. The same techniques are similar to the ones I use in my own stone sculptures. And for those of you who don't know about the sgraffito, it's just an amazing process that Joseph Lone Wolf experimented with in the 60s, like Cliff said. And what this was is the original clay is kind of brownish and terracotta looking. When you fire it and do the reduction process, and in our case with the horse manure, it does the reduction process and turns the outer layer black after you polish it with a river stone. And that is not an easy thing to do. After it's fired, you can take an X-Acto knife, sharp knife, and start making these very intricate, in Joseph Lone Wolf's case, very intricate designs about who we are. What we see is important. And I got to tell you, and I've tried it many times. Like, you see how this starts and goes around This design goes all the way around, and it is done perfectly. That is not easy, especially when the vessel is pretty small. For someone to do that, you must be with the clay. Like Alex said, I was just honored to be asked to select a vessel, and I knew immediately. I mean, the minute Alicia asked me, I knew exactly the vessels I wanted to write about. This is Lonnie the Hill. He's from Nambe, Pueblo, and that's about 40 minutes outside of Santa Fe. Although Lonnie lived for a while in Washington, D.C. and worked in finance. Can you imagine? And this is a huge geographical and cultural distance between D.C. and Nambe. But when the clay calls, there's no denying it. It's a kind of call that you feel rather than hear. And the clay call can happen anytime, anywhere, even if you live in the city. Lonnie grew up in Nambe, Pueblo, where the whole village participated in clay work. This is Lonnie's knowing, and you can see it in every single vessel he makes. When a vessel is centered, the potter knows it almost immediately. And everything else about the coiling, the shaping, and the design follows. The base, yeah, right? The base of Lonnie's vessel is surprisingly small, and yet it perfectly supports clay walls that immediately fan out toward the hips of the vessel. Then, almost like defying gravity, the walls slant toward a slight dip, gracefully curving inward to form the neck that makes way for the lip and the opening of the most magnificent vessel I've ever seen. This architectural feat is made more poignant by the fact this vessel is balanced not by a machine, but by hands that move in absolute concert with material. Lonnie's vessel was finished with a coat of micaceous clay slip that glitters like 1,000 stars on a smoked clay canvas. The Hill's approach to creating comes from a strong cultural upbringing passed down by his family and community. But it's the clay that opened the door to his gift. When Lonnie heard the clay calling, he came home, and how lucky for all of us that he did. I hope that all of you check out the book, and even if you don't buy it, look through it. Read the words from these 70 curators that spent their time and energy to select pottery and to write about it and to spend time exchanging ideas with other collaborators. And so if you visit the Grounded in Clay again, think about these words that they're saying and how they have been anchored to this process of clay work, their knowing that's been passed down to them and that they will pass down to their children. Welcome to Grounded in Clay. Thank you. And I think I'm supposed to take questions, is that?
Yes. So if you have a question, sorry, I'm over here. If you have a question, just raise your hand and Mary Claire or I will come to you and give you a microphone. I think we're going to get started.
Would you speak?
I will sign your book. Thank you.
Would you speak about your work that I'm over here?
Oh, hi.
Would you speak about the work, the 3 pieces? I think it's called pods.
Of course.
They're just exquisite.
There, right? Oh, wait, one more.
It's okay. Oh. There you go.
In the spring, there are a lot of pods, and they're like from outer space, especially the ones that are garlic. The garlic have these really long stems, and then they have these beautiful bulbs at the end that sort of present themselves to the world. I spend a lot of time in the spring and early summer looking at them. And so one day I was so inspired, I went into my studio and I started making these, and they're coiled from Santa Clara and micaceous clay. And micaceous clay is a very strong clay. It's used primarily in Taos Pueblo and Picaris Pueblo for utilitarian purposes. And so I combine Santa Clara and micaceous clay so that the clay will be strong. I coiled these, and then they were fired and in different ways. And I used the plates. See the plates on each one of them? I colored the plates, and then I put them in my house. And my 2-year-old granddaughter was learning how to ride a bike. Yes. You know the story, right? I watched her in slow motion run into one of them. And I couldn't stop her. So I let the process happen, and she looked at me and she said, "It's okay, you can glue it." Right? So I couldn't do that. So I made a completely new piece. And around that time, I met Helen Kornblum. And she was very instrumental, like Alex said, in helping bring this piece to the St. Louis Art Museum. But they're hollow and they're coiled. I think the tall black piece is about 33 inches. So they're fairly large, and I think you can see them here. I mean, I saw them here. Yeah.
They are currently, yes, they are
Yeah.
currently on view.
Bisque stains, yeah, it's sort of like a coloring that you can get. And some people are purist in our communities. They don't deal with any kind of manufactured coloring. I'm of the ilk that will use any material that's available to me. I've run over clay, I've made footprints on it. I am an experimenter. And so this is a perfect example of that. Why not make a disc and color it green?
Just to clarify that you can see these, they're in gallery 232. 323. I got those up like that.
323? Yeah. No, I buffed them with with my granddaughter's diaper. That, the diaper, those are really good material. That's really good material to buff clay with. It's soft. Yeah, so I buffed it with one of my granddaughter's diapers. Now the truth comes out, right?
Can you explain a little bit of the process up in the gallery? It says clay and paint. Can you explain exactly what that means?
The clay and paint?
Well, the paint part.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I was saying, and are you asking me about my particular process?
No, I'm asking about the pieces in the grounded exhibition.
I'm not, I don't know where you saw that, but I'm sure it's there. I just don't know I can talk about my work, but the paint that maybe you're talking about may be from some other paint-like material that's either purchased or gathered from the mountains.
The signage is very odd. It seems to me it's like oxides that are fired in and painted on before the firing.
Well, what happens is like some of the iron oxide, which is like if you're traveling from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, just past Santo Domingo and Cochiti Pueblos on your way to Santa Fe, if you look to the left-hand side, there's just a lot of iron oxide red material that we gather our slip from. And that slip is clay, a natural clay. And when we gather it, we sift it, and it becomes a very, very smooth paint, a clay paint, that a lot of the potters coat onto a dry vessel, and then they get a polishing rock, and they start burnishing it. And that's, I'm probably not answering your question, but that's the only paint that I'm familiar with. Yeah.
I have a question about how you fire your works. Are you doing traditionally a wood firing? Maybe some in an electric kiln, maybe some in a gas kiln?
All of the above. Yeah, because I just finished making this piece that was 9 feet high. Yeah, woo. I did it in sections, and I had to use a kiln because I wasn't sure the firing would be even outside. And I had spent so much time that I wanted to make sure that I had as much control as possible. And I will keep repeating that I experiment all the time in how I approach the clay.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I wondered if you could speak to the process that you went through and that the other curators went through choosing the pieces that would go into the show. Did everybody kind of have a notion of which pieces they wanted to choose, or was it a selection process, or how did that work?
I think for everyone it was different. So maybe if you see the other curators who are here tonight, you can ask them what compelled them to pick their piece. Like the one I talked about with Albert from Isleta del Sur, he picked something from his community. And I think that makes sense. Or Russell Sanchez picked his grandmother's bowl. I would do that. And so when I've always been a fan of Lonnie V. Hill's work. And so when I saw his work, and when I got asked, I knew it was a no-brainer for me that I wanted to write about it, and I wanted to think about it and spend time with it. So looked at a lot of pictures of his work. And so I think, please feel free to ask the other curators, because I'm sure they'd be very happy to talk about why they made their selection. But it's a personal thing, I think, that they pick their work.
Well, I have a question that probably displays my inexperience with the world in general, but in your pictures, you showed people standing on the mesa, and then you showed a distance picture of the mesa. And I was wondering, do people live on top of that mesa?
They still do. Not a whole lot of families do, but some people still, they still live on that mesa.
How do they get up there, and how do they bring their food and water up there?
The question is, and I think I'm hearing you right, is that do people still live on that? Let me see if I can pull that up.
Not even still. I was wondering if they lived up there at all. If
Yes.
they live on top of the mesa, how do they bring everything up there
Okay.
to live?
Oh, yeah, they still live on the mesa. Not a lot of people, because it's a very, it's a hard life. So not very many people live there anymore, from my understanding. But there are a lot of people that moved down because it's a little bit easier to get into Albuquerque or their work, or there's electricity and like that. But there's still people that live on top.
So there's no electricity or running water or anything up there?
To my knowledge, I don't think there is.
It's beautiful.
Oh, I hope you won't find this question too personal, but I so love your personal anecdotes about your granddaughter. And I love thinking about honoring the ancestors in this work. And I wonder if you could reflect about your own first experiences with teaching from maybe your grandparents, and then how you as a innovator thinks about teaching your granddaughter.
Okay. We'll just go back and forth. You'll get to see the pieces over and over again. I wanted to answer by showing you this picture of my mother. This is Rose Naranjo. She's no longer with us. Rose had 9 children, and she learned pottery making from her grandmother. And so it's been coming down for a long time. And when I was young, my mother would say, okay, it's spring, we have to go to the mountains. And I'd go, ugh, I don't want to go and drag clay here and there, put it in a bucket, and then spend hours sifting. I wanted to play. I wanted to read comics, or I wanted to do anything but what I learned is that when we would drive up to gather micaceous clay, we'd have to drive up into the mountains. And my mother was, because she had 9 kids to feed and take care of, she rarely smiled. She was a taskmaster. And so when we drive up to gather clay, there would be a point where the sun was coming down, and if it had rained, micaceous clay covered the entire dirt road. And I would look at her, and I could tell she was in heaven. This was when she was the most herself. She was happy and excited. And when she came to the clay pit, or the vein, you could tell there was an excitement in the air, and there were the prayers, and there was the lunch afterwards. And yes, it was hard work, But after a while, when I saw what it did to her soul, I thought, yeah, that's what I want. And when I saw her sitting in a corner, very much like this, look at her. She's focused, man. She's just there. And just like Russell said, you don't teach that. You observe, if you're watching it as a child, you're observing that. And that's what you want your life to be. And I knew as I got a little bit older and more appreciative of this process that she was showing me, I knew this is what I needed to do because I had gone to college and I got a degree in social welfare and I lasted maybe a week. Because I was sitting in an office looking, you know those big industrial looking clocks? And the hand just sort of goes like this. I knew this, the clay called me too. And I think we come from that culture, and if you open yourself up and you're ready for that, I think the clay calls you and invites you to have an alternative lifestyle that is that relationship to the clay. So when I got a little older, I started becoming more interested. And now, I can't stop. I don't want to stop. Yeah. Thank you.